much, Maribel, and your colleagues for hosting me here in Vigo on this solemn occasion of the launching of the SOS-VICS project. Thank you very much, Jesus, for the elegant introduction, which, as usual, makes it very difficult to live up to the expectations. And thanks to the interpreters who are willing to interpret this talk in the company, in front of, and confronted with so many fellow students who are certainly very anxious as to how you're doing. But well done and congratulations. And if I speak to was no legal basis at the time to force the member states to implement the framework decision. Second important point, if you look at the title, it's a framework decision on certain procedural rights. That is more than interpreting and translation. As a matter of fact, it was a framework decision on 5 issues or guarantees of the fair trial. 5. Legal advice, interpreting translation, communication, letter of rights, persons who cannot understand the proceedings. So those are 5 guarantees or safeguards, interpreting and translation being only one of them. My point is, a framework decision is not as forceful as what we have now. 2, it was an overloaded wagon. There was just too much in that one document for then all the member states to be able to agree on. Moreover, for example, if we only take interpreting and translation, there was one article in there which has never appeared ever since because it's ludicrous, and that is there was a recommendation, if you want, to audio or videotape every phase of a criminal proceeding. Now you can imagine that the member states, the minute they saw that article, were going to say, are you out of your mind? Are you forcing us to video or audio tape everything? Do you know the cost? Do you know the storage problems? Do you know the possibility of lawyers using that material to go on appeal, etc., etc.? So it seems as if that article was inserted in that framework proposal to wreck it from the beginning, to undermine and destroy it from the beginning. Anyway, for 3 years, as you can see on the slide, for 3 years they talked about that proposal, from 2004 to 2007. And then ultimately the Commission forced the member states to a vote, and 6 member states remained opposed. And this is my last point about the framework decision. A framework decision had to be agreed on, approved by unanimity. So all the member states had to agree. If one voted against, that was the end of the story. So a framework decision could only be passed by unanimity. The Commission was desperate and said, how can we convince the member states to take it up again? And we carried out a project, the Status Questionis, in which we provided a sort of a survey of legal interpreting and translation in the EU, and we questioned the member states on all sorts of issues, not terribly important, but the conclusion of the report was that there was still a long way to go. So the project actually was a sort of argument to the Commission, we must carry on with the provision of interpreting and translation in criminal proceedings. By the way, all the documents that I'm showing, all the reports, all the slides, whatever, can be found on the EULITA website, which I will show you in a few minutes. The real breakthrough came, as probably it should be and should have been, it came during the Swedish presidency. As you know, every member state in turn alternates, takes over the presidency of the council for half a year. And in 2009, Sweden took it up and developed a new concept. And they said, well, we have to stop trying to do everything at once, everything at the same time. We are simply, as I said earlier, overloading this wagon. Why don't we take these 5 procedural safeguards, which we believe in, the package of 5, the big 5, but why don't we take them one by one at a time? Yeah? It's the salami strategy, saucissonnage. Yeah? You cut it in small pieces which you can eat, which you can swallow and digest. And so that's the idea of the roadmap. And as, with the exception of that one article on recording, which everyone thought, was crazy, and that thrown out, inspired the Swedes to introduce, or the Commission really, yes, I shouldn't say the Swedes, but they were behind it as a sort of mastermind of the strategy. But it inspired the Commission to introduce the earlier framework decision again, but this time only on interpretation and translation, so on one of the 5 procedural safeguards. That was quite a good, maybe just one, it was quite a good text actually, because the rather difficult, bothersome articles had been thrown out, and lots of ideas of the green paper had been taken up again. Because now in one document, only on interpreting and translation, it was felt there was room for a better document. Yeah? It hadn't, you didn't have to bury it under all that other stuff. This is where we were roughly at the end of 2009, and then suddenly, well, not so suddenly, because obviously that had a long history as well, the Treaty of Lisbon came around at the end of 2009, and this is a crucial treaty for us, because as I said, this long history of incorporating the idea of justice as an EU priority now got a legal basis in the Treaty of Lisbon. The Treaty of Lisbon does have articles on justice which make the European Union a legal actor, make it possible to be a legal actor in taking decisions that are related, for example, to the European Convention. Also interesting, if you look at the bottom of the slide at Article 9, that they shall now act by qualified majority. Yeah? So there are 2 crucial things here. The European Union can now enact legislation in the area of justice. No longer framework decisions, no longer elegant recommendations, but they now can enact legislation in the field of justice. As before, they could in socio-economic, political, environmental issues, or whatever. Now, the European Union can make laws in the field of justice. Secondly, they can do so by majority, no longer by unanimity, and that's crucial. So the Commission thought, if we can now make laws, directives in the field of justice, why not turn the framework decision, which is before us on the table, why not turn that into a directive? Which is what they did. Because the directive, of course, is a much more forceful instrument to force member states to do something. That's the directive. This is the directive on the right to interpretation and translation in criminal proceedings. I'll be very brief about it. I'll just sort of, take you on a very, very quick tour of the directive. It's important to realize that it is from from the moment you are suspected or accused until the conclusion of the proceedings, throughout the whole process. You're arrested, which is you can be accused, but you can also be suspected. For example, they can just arrive at your doorstep and begin a search, a house search. That is part of the criminal proceeding, and is therefore also falls under the directive. It applies to police questioning, all court hearings. It applies also, as you see in Article 2, on communication between the suspect or the accused person and their lawyer. So this is the famous Saldus case in Strasbourg now, where a person that is arrested or charged, before he or she is interviewed by the police, is entitled to communication with their legal counsel, and if that requires interpreting, then an interpreter has to be provided for the meeting between the suspect, the arrested person, and their lawyer. Video conferencing is explicitly mentioned, and the European arrest warrant, because it was clear from an interim evaluation of the European arrest warrant that one of the reasons why it doesn't really work as it should is because of, and I quote, the poor quality of the translations.